Welcome back to another live. My name is Yocheved, and once again, I am joined by my good friend Avi Benmordechai, who is a clinical psychotherapist. And by popular demand, we are going for part 2 of our very important series of the Breaking Silence series. I think Avi is getting ready to join me. For all of you who are watching and seeing us going live, please share this video with your friends and let them know that we are live once again, just as you all have requested. I am going to get Avi on board and accept his invitation. With the magic of once again, we're going to have Avi join us right now. Okay, I think Avi is joining. There you go, Avi. How are you?
All right. Nice to see you today. Ready?
Likewise, nice to see you as well. And I'm going to do what we did last time. For my viewers, thank you, Svetlana. Let us know, are you able to see me clearly? Am I full screen? Are you able to hear me clearly? Let me see those likes, hearts. Let's, not that I can see anything at this point. Are you seeing anything, Avi? Because the screen is like blank.
I think if you back up a little bit, we'll be able to see you a little bit more and just
Okay.
put the camera a little bit lower down.
All right, there we go.
Yeah, perfect.
Yay, okay. Everyone on board. I don't see anybody commenting. Is anybody watching? Come on, let me see that you're on so that we can start this really, really, really important segment, because the last time we were live with Avi, I think it was over a week ago, we actually got a very, very big response, and the outreach was tremendous. Even until today, I have someone that called me actually today, and she was wondering, like, when are you guys doing your workshop? What's happening with that? We are very much looking forward to it. There are still many, many people reaching out to Avi, reaching out to me as well, trying to get clarity, answers, therapy, coaching, whatever it may be. And like never before, I know Avi will agree with me on this. We have noticed that there is a tremendous, tremendous need for bringing this topic up and making more awareness around it. Not that it never existed, not that we're trying to, ruffle feathers and trying to talk about anything that all of a sudden, no, it's just more than ever before. It has gotten to be very important to raise awareness. So today in particular, I know one of our viewers actually suggested this topic. So we are on board with it, and the topic is men's mental health. So Avi, when you hear the word men's mental health, I want to ask you, is it different than women's mental health?
What do you think, Yocheved?
I don't know, posing the question to you. Is it different?
Well, it's a good question. I'll tell you this. Um, Mental health, obviously, can be both for men and women. However, men, I very much believe, carry a certain stigma attached to them, right? So, for example, let's start off with the stigma around mental health. Big boys don't cry. They don't usually use that same sentence for women, right? Now, men have taken this statement on very seriously for years, right? Toughen up, big boys don't cry. And through that, they were not able to express themselves the way they're supposed to. If you think about it, the only acceptable emotion that a man is allowed to express is anger. For many people, that would be the okay emotion for a man to express. But how about sadness? How about pain? How about struggles? How about worries, right? We don't really talk about this so much. If a man is angry, oh, he's manly, he's strong, right? But in
I'm not
reality,
sure that's really right. My idea about
well,
being angry and strong may
well,
differ a
well,
little
hang
bit.
on, hang on. I'm talking about the misconception that's attached to it, right? Thanks for the clarification, right? For many, if he's a man, they say, hey, if he's angry, they say, oh, he's a man, right? He gets away with it. But in reality, anger is just a mask for what's actually going on underneath the surface. So today, we want to break down into many different steps, specifically the topic of men's mental health. And of course, I'm so glad to have you here as a co-host to talk about this together and what you see it from a woman's perspective as well. So I think the first area where we should talk about is that stigma that I was talking about, right? Seeking out support. Because think about it, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, but we associate ourselves in a very judgmental crowd, right? Whether it's the supermarket, whether it's the congregation, whether it's the neighborhood, whether it's the stores that we go to, or the people we associate ourselves with, people talk. We know that people talk. You know, recently I was I went away for a weekend. And during that weekend, the topic of mental health came up. And that whole weekend, we were talking about many topics of mental health. And there were a lot of guys there. And at the end of that weekend, a number of the guys came up to me and said, wow, this was such a beautiful experience. We got to talk about such real stuff that we never really got a chance to talk about. You know, men, you should just know that men actually genuinely, if they feel safe, they genuinely appreciate talking about these topics of pain, of sadness, of struggle, because they finally feel seen. A lot of the times, the needs of men are unseen, and they carry this with them on their shoulders. What are your thoughts?
No, absolutely agree with you because as you were talking about a support system, see, women have a tendency, they're very emotional creatures, right? Something happened, they always have the tendency to pick up the phone, call my mother, my friend, my sister-in-law, my neighbor, my coworker. They like to tell stories of what happened, you know what she did to me, you know what he did to me. There's a lot of drama involved with women. And it's good. Like it keeps us going. There's a lot of emotions there. We vent our frustration. We talk about how upset we feel, and somehow that's very therapeutic. We let it out. Men, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're not meant for those type of conversations. When they pick up the call to call their friend, the conversations are mostly business related, related to the job, related to a basketball game, a soccer game. Maybe they want to talk about a night out, going out for dinner. Their conversations are very different. They're not, most men don't talk about, you know, how pissed off they are at their wife or what their cousin did to them or what their sister-in-law said to them. They just don't find these type of conversations worthwhile. It's almost like it's like too much drama from it. And men like to stay away from drama most of the time. They have other things to worry about. If you ask them how to make money, they love conversations like that. Ask them about who is in the next basketball game, the NFL, they love conversations like that. So the type of conversations a man has is very different than a woman has. So from the start, we know that a man doesn't really have that venting session. So what happens to him? He starts to bubble up. He starts holding and holding and holding things inside until it reaches a point of either he's going to shut down and be depressed. And what does depression look like for a man? He's not going to be that, you know, leader he once was. He's not going to perform the way he once was. He's all of a sudden going to be reserved. You know, he's not as forthcoming as he was. Or it's going to be the other extreme, where all these feelings of him bottling up and bottling up and bottling up, he's going to be very anxious and so stimulated and so full of energy, he has to release it somewhere, that he's going to have these very grandiose type of conversations and almost act very manic, like he wants to conquer the whole world in a very, very irrational way. And it is our job, and I say our job, especially the role of a woman, the wife, the mother, the sister, whichever support member there is around that particular individual, to be aware of these signs. You know, many times when we see a man all of a sudden being reserved and quiet and not talking as much, we may be like, what's going on? Chetak malchish, say something. And if it happens in a very repetitive pattern over and over again, or where he's acting too much, he's not sleeping very well, he can't fall asleep. There are days and days that he's without sleep, and you're like, why aren't you sleeping? He can't fall asleep. His mind is not shutting off. Rather than look at it like, this is just the way he is, there are signs you have to be made aware of. Now, I remember having a conversation last episode with an individual who actually asked me, Avi, why is it so important that we keep talking about it? It's almost like because we talk about this topic, we are putting into people's brains that these things are abnormal. We're introducing this concept. Like, why is it so important? Why are we talking so much about it? And I had to correct this individual because, you see, I don't think we're having this conversation just because we're trying to now label everybody as being depressed, anxious, bipolar, having some mood disorder. That's not the point of these lives. It's not there for you to walk around and say, maybe my husband is depressed. Maybe he's going through some anxiety. It kind of sounds like what she just said. It's not for that purpose. You start to be aware of your surroundings when it starts affecting your relationship, when it starts to affect the way your husband is fathering the children. All of a sudden, the relationship starts to go a different direction. You know him one way. You're married for many years. You see your son for many years. You know their personality. And now it's shifting. It's starting to feel almost like this is a different person. I don't recognize him. This is the time to start being aware of maybe something is up. Right, Avi? What do you think?
I think the first part, when you were talking about, you said, men don't really like to talk about their feelings. Men like to talk about sports, they like to talk about money and business and things like that. I agree with you. When a man feels safe, that he won't be judged, that he won't look weak, that's when he can actually open up to his friend or to a community member and share a piece of his heart and saying, hey, I'm struggling with this. And the many conversations I had with men who knew there was no judgment whatsoever because I'm here with them, leveled on the same level, really trying to understand their pain. Yocheved, they opened up their heart and they broke down and they shared. And after that conversation, it was like, wow, I'm not crazy. I'm normal for having these
I'm a
feelings.
therapist. You're a therapist.
Whether I have them as a client or even as a human being, as a person, whether I saw somebody in shul, whether I saw somebody, I was with someone over Shabbat, even just a simple conversation to say like, hey, there's no judgment here. I don't only do this as a therapist in my office, the mentality of no judgment. It's no judgment across the board. And when people can sense your energy.
Right.
And if they feel like I can share something with you and I know that I'm safe here, they feel so comfortable doing it. Now, the first step is why men don't do it is because they unfortunately, we feel judged to share our vulnerabilities. But it's very important to recognize that when we share our vulnerabilities, it's not coming from a place of weakness. Rather, it's coming from a place of strength, from a place of saying, hey, I see my challenges, and through there I will be able to build resilience. That is the first step. The key is to recognize that you are human. The story that was ingrained into so many men through generation after generation after generation, is that you cannot express yourself. You are not allowed to have feelings other than anger, right? You're not allowed to have pain and sadness and a hard day. And a lot of the times when men are not validated in that way, this goes off to the way they parent their children, right? When we create a safe space of saying like, hey, you're allowed to talk about your hard days, and it's not only for a woman to say, but we can all talk about our feelings, and feelings are valid. That is the baseline. That is the first step. We all go through challenges. We all have ups and downs, but it's important for us to be able to find that somebody, that support person in our life. It could be a spouse, it could be a friend, it could be a rabbi, it could be a community member, it can even be a therapist. It can be somebody who will hold safe space for you to allow you to be yourself without wearing a mask. The next one is whenever we express ourselves emotionally. A lot of the times, the way we express ourselves can also come across the wrong way, right? Because we feel like men, a lot of the times, I'll speak to a woman, a couple, and the woman will tell me, whenever I speak to my husband, I feel attacked. Men, this is for you guys. Whenever you're struggling with something, I see you're smiling over there.
No, it's interesting. I wasn't prepared for this.
A lot of the times when we want to talk, there's also a way how to talk about our feelings, right? So the first step is we validated that we can have feelings and now we can talk about them. It's really important that we address them in a way that doesn't come across as attacking, right? We don't want to attack our spouse. For example, you always do this or you never do this, right? It's very important for us to share how things make us feel. So, for example, let's say the spouse says, and this happens, right? When you yell at me, if the husband is now saying about the wife, when you yell at me, it makes me feel worthless, right?
The husband is saying to his wife, okay.
Right. Sharing his feelings, right? When you yell at me, it makes me feel worthless, right? So the husband is sharing how he feels. The man shares how he feels. When a man shares how he feels, it's less likely to come across as an attack on the woman. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So in terms of communication, a lot of the times, what happens in relationships? Stonewalling. What is stonewalling? Shutting down. Whenever there's too much friction happening, what happens? Blank affect, blank face, the silent treatment, doesn't want to get into it, doesn't want to talk about it. And then when you ask why, what's stopping you? Forget it. I don't even I'm done. I don't even want to go there, right? And because of this, a lot of the times we can't have that full-on communication because one partner is so shut off. That leads us into emotional availability, allowing ourselves to be uncomfortable. Now we're getting into another area. Of course, we're talking about healthy communication, not if you're being attacked. It's really hard to be in a conversation with someone when they have things to share about you, right? If they're not happy with certain things that you do, to be emotionally available and sit throughout that conversation and come to a resolution. It's important to recognize that it's uncomfortable, but allow yourself to be there. It's like going to the gym, right? When you go to the gym and you want to bench press, 200 pounds, it's going to be hard to do that, right? But if you go every single day and work out and build that muscle, eventually you will be able to do it. Same thing in certain relationships. A lot of the times, it's it's difficult across the board, not only for men, even for women too. It's difficult to be in a situation where you're having this conversation specifically about relationships, things that make you feel uncomfortable. What are your thoughts?
I'm actually curious for the people who are watching, if you can comment, I would love to see the comments coming in. What do you think are some ways that men present, like, what do you think are some ways that men present with if they are feeling either worried, anxious, sad, lonely? I'm curious to know from our viewers, what ways will they describe a man? Like, how do they think a man will present himself if he's feeling that way? Will they
What do you mean?
be the same? Will they look the same as a woman would, or would they act differently? I'm just curious to see what the comments are going to be coming in with.
Before the comments come in, of course I'm going to tell you right now, of course it's different, and it's meant to be different. We're not meant to be the same, right? But with that said, let's also recognize that even though with our differences, we're allowed to also have feelings, right? Would you agree to say, if I say that there's a lot of pressure put on men?
Of course. But I'll tell you, I also would say there is a lot of pressure put on men, but the times we're living in, okay, 2024, not that I'm sounding very liberal here, don't get me wrong, there is an equal amount of pressure being put on the woman. Let me correct,
We're not, hang on.
no,
We're
because
not
I
disagreeing.
can't differentiate anymore. Like if you ask this question maybe in 1948 or 1970, or even 1992, right? Back in the days, maybe I sound wrong. I mean, this is just my opinion, where primarily women would sit home and their key role would be to raise children. And the man had to go out there and do so much and provide and support the family and was always out and had so much on his plate. I would say, yes, men have a lot on their plate. Is it easy to be a stay-at-home mom? Absolutely not. Nowadays, okay, I find it equally as difficult to be a woman and equally as difficult to be a man, equally have the same burden to be a woman and equally have the same burden to be a man, because there are some women that have a hat of a man and a woman. Not that you can never
I
switch a
hear.
role, right? The man is to wear the pants and the hat. That's different. But as far as burden and the role, it's almost identical, because there are some women who have a tremendous financial burden on themselves, right? Because they are making a lot of the money, not because they're more powerful, but they are making more money in a sense of their careers are maybe more established. So a lot of the bills, the responsibility falls on them, right? The mental pressure of having to go to work every day because they can't back out, because they already established that lifestyle for themselves, having to come home and make food and all that doesn't negate how much a man has on his shoulders. Burden wise, it's almost the same. Now, the pressures from society and what a man, as far as respect and everything else, absolutely, I agree. The man is still, the way we want to practice our thinking, again, everybody thinks differently. Is a man superior as far as like his roles, and he's ahead of the house, and the
You're
respect level?
talking.
Absolutely.
You're talking traditionally.
In the traditional aspect, but as
Right.
far as the physical and which role and how much burden, I feel like it's almost identical.
I was not comparing.
No, as a
And I
question,
actually, I want to share. That's a great point. This is a great example of what happens in many relationships, right? Let's say the husband comes home
Mhm.
and he comes to his wife and he says, "Honey, babe, I had such a hard day today," right? And she looks at him and she says, "What about me? I was with the kids. I also worked. I cooked. I cleaned. How about me?" We're not
Accept it. Very fair.
we're not saying you didn't do any of that. We're not talking about you right now.
Let's put it this
We're,
way, Avi. What should be the proper response?
honestly,
Yeah, like let's say that response didn't go well. Like you said, what about me? Fine. Negate that response. What should be the right response? Let's hear.
okay, I might get bashed on this online,
Okay, good.
but if your husband comes home and says, wow, I had such a really hard day today, tell me about it.
Uh-huh.
What happened today, right? Just a validation. It's not about you not having a hard day. It's not about you didn't work and you didn't cook and you didn't take care of the kids, right? A lot of the times we're so, and again, this is for everyone across the board. We all do this sometimes, right? When we feel like we put in so much and then here our spouse comes and is talking about their day. The first thing we want to do is talk about how hard our day was, right? But in reality, before we do that, it's like a little bit, let's have a little bit of self-control, right? If they're coming up and saying, "Hey, we had a really hard day," if now you start with your defensiveness, "What do you think about me?" Right? What happens to that husband? Immediately shuts down, right? Like, okay, no problem, honey. What happened in your day, right? His needs were not being met. Now, this takes work. It's not easy. With that said, I'm sure she also had a lot that she did that day, and she also needs to talk about it for sure. But time and place, right? If is coming at that moment and talking about his hard day, create a space for him to share and hear him out without having to tell him all the stuff that you did. And wait a little bit. When things settle down, now it's your turn and go for it. Hey, I want to share something with you that happened today. It was really hard for me. And then it's his turn to say, oh, tell me about it. I want to hear about it, right? And not even correct, not fix, just sit and just listen. What are your thoughts? Did I
I
pass your test?
yeah. I actually also think it's very important. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. This is my personal opinion. Like when somebody always has a bad day
Mm,
or always
okay.
has something bad to say.
Okay.
Okay. That too can sometimes be like when people complain about everything, every part of their day, every single day. After a while, you don't take them seriously anymore.
You're talking about a very big topic. It's
Right. So the reason I'm bringing it up, okay, is because sometimes, and this is, let's now turn the stage, right? Um, if a person is constantly, I had a rough day, I had a hard time at work, my boss did this, constantly complaining, of course we have to figure out what's the reason. Why is he complaining so much? Is something really emotionally bothering him? Or is this person just a very negative person? And if a person is very negative, where they don't find the positivity in any situation, this job is a problem, this boss is a problem, this coworker is a problem, this career is a problem, this hour is a problem. After a while, it literally gets to a point where you can't listen anymore. Where it's almost like when the person comes home and he wants to talk about his day or she wants to talk about her day, we have to be mindful, right? If we're constantly complaining about everything, after a while, what happens to the second person, the spouse? They shut down. They shut down. It's almost like, tell me something new. Tell me something I don't already know. And then we start to feel like, well, you never listen to me. You never listen to me. You don't want to hear me when I talk. Right. Because if you're constantly complaining about everything, you're no longer taken seriously. The reason I say this is because I think that's very important for mental health also. Sometimes people literally shut down because they're constantly hearing complaints, negativity. We have to be mindful of our surroundings. We need to understand that when we're negative and constantly focusing on the bad, and our spouses, children, parents, family members, coworkers are surrounded by that negativity on a daily basis, that affects their mental health system too. That may be your way of coping with things, constantly to have something to say about everything. But your spouse may not be equipped for this. They don't know how to handle this. It's too much to come home on a daily basis and literally hear complaints on a 24 hours a day basis. And then they won't validate it because it's almost like they're exhausted from it. So how was your day? Great. And then once in a while, to find something negative to say, great, let's address it. But if we're wondering why after all these how was your days and every day it's a bad day, people just don't want to listen anymore. We need to figure out the reason behind it too. It's not benign.
So that's exactly the point. It's that person who's complaining. It seems like their needs are not being met, right? Of course, there is a person who is an optimistic person, someone who looks at the cup half full, someone who can see the good things of certain situations, and there are pessimistic people. I agree. But there's also something called a cognitive distortion, right? What is a cognitive distortion? It's when our brain is built to see things a very specific way, right?
Mm.
I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Let's say you buy your 15-year-old son a pair of white Nike sneakers.
Mhm.
You pay $300 and you get him a beautiful pair of white Nike sneakers, all right? He's so excited to put them on. He puts them on, he goes outside, and a truck comes by and gets his sneakers dirty, okay? Just an example. In the moment, in that moment, you can have two situations. Either he can say, "Oh man, my sneakers got dirty. I can just wipe it down. I'll be okay." In another situation, it's white or black thinking, which means all or nothing. Either I have perfect sneakers, or if they're a little bit stained, I cannot wear them anymore, right? Unfortunately, sometimes people see the world through that kind of lens, all or nothing. Either I go to this place and I'm having the best time ever, or I had the worst time ever, right? A lot of the times when people are raised in a household like this, and it's this type of thinking is not changed, yeah, they can go through life constantly complaining, not seeing the goodness that life has to bring. That's a whole other ballgame. Well, we have a lot of cognitive distortions in our brain, whether it's mind reading, another one, right? For example, you go to a wedding. Let's say a woman gets dressed, she wears a beautiful, nice dress, and she goes to the wedding and thinks everyone is looking at me, right? I had this conversation with somebody the other day, not naming names. Um, the person was supposed to go to an event, and the person said, "I don't have anything to wear." And I said, "Oh, why don't you wear that?" And the person said, "No, I wore that already." And I said, "But nobody saw it. No, who remembers, right?" A lot of the times we feel like the spotlight effect, that people are looking at us, people will talk about us, people are saying things about us. In reality, no one is doing that, right? That's our own thinking, where we feel like we know what other people are thinking. And that actually tremendously affects us. So, for example, for the woman, like you said, who's exhausted from her husband coming home and talking about his pain and everything that's going on, in reality, first of all, number one,
It could be
she
both
should
ways.
be,
It could be
it could be
vice
both
versa
ways,
too.
right? It could be both ways. Number one, you also want to check your own your emotional availability. You want to see, like, why is this triggering so much for me? What's coming up for me, right? So that's number one. If you genuinely feel you're dealing with a person who has a hard time of seeing things in an optimistic way, then that's a conversation to have. But oftentimes, if the complaining keeps happening, there could also be fear there. Let's say that spouse is coming home and complaining about their difficult job, right? Maybe they're afraid to lose their job. Maybe they're afraid to leave their job. And if they do leave their job, they're going to have to now be afraid. How am I going to pay for the mortgage? How am I going to pay for the kids' schools? How am I going to put food on the table? There's so much that comes with that, right? So even though they're sometimes just talking about, "I had such a hard day at work," a lot of the times there's so much more happening beneath the surface.
True. No, I was saying that for sure. If you see that there's definitely your spouse is not happy in a work environment, in a certain neighborhood, in a certain congregation, of course, validate that. We're not saying that people are not supposed to express emotions, because that is very, very important for our mental health, to be in a place that brings us goodness and happiness and positivity. That's not what I was saying before. What I was saying before, just to clarify, in case there was a misunderstanding, sometimes our mental health deteriorates because of negative surroundings
Mhm,
around us.
mhm,
And it is very mindful, right? Like Avi was saying, sometimes our child upbringing can make us start looking at everything as the glass being half full or half empty, is the way we were raised. So we are so used to and accepting of looking at things in a very critical way, because we were raised in such families, and that's just the way we were. We don't see anything wrong with expressing the like the bad side to situations. We just feel like it's like we're literally just verbalizing our feeling. But our spouse may not be equipped, because every time he hears a negative remark, somewhere in his subconscious mind, he starts to accumulate all this negativity. And it starts to build up and build up and build up. And not everybody is able and equipped to hold so much negativity. So even though we think it's merely communication, we're just communicating. She looked at me the wrong way. Why does she not call me at a certain time? Well, my boss, he didn't give me the raise I wanted. We're constantly bringing negativity into our lives, not realizing all those negative statements eventually start to pile up to our spouse, who may not be aware that it's even happening. And after years of marriage, that spouse lashes out, and we're like, what happened to you? Because he was trying to be strong and hold it in, hold it in, hold it in, and he cannot be strong anymore. So he just said, I can't take it, enough is enough. And we're like, what's going on? So my point is communication. It's key. Communication is very, very important for our mental health. If you are that spouse who is not accustomed to listening to all the negativity, but you're not communicating this to your wife, and you're constantly like, yeah, 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 smiling, she's just going to keep telling you and venting her problems. 5 years down the road, don't blow up on it. You never communicated how much this is affecting you, how much this is bothering you. Same goes to the person who's constantly venting and complaining. If you are the type of person and you have a tendency to constantly complain and look at everything from a glass as being half empty, you have to understand it doesn't only affect you, it affects your children, it affects your husband, it affects your friends. Everybody around you now has to, unfortunately, sit with that negativity. So we as individuals have to work on ourselves, because our way of talking and looking at things doesn't just affect us, it affects everybody around us. So unfortunately, sometimes our relationships are affected because of our partners. That doesn't mean our partners are bad. It means we don't communicate with each other properly. If you realize your partner is out of line, it's really affecting you. She doesn't want to go to your mother on a daily basis. She doesn't like your mother. One time you're quiet, 2 times you're quiet, 3 times you're quiet. But what happens after a while? You blow up. You don't like my mother? That's too bad. That's my mother. But the communication has to be set from the beginning. Talk about it. Express yourselves. Go seek help. Counselors, marriage therapists, rabbis. Pray about it. Whatever you have to do to try to resolve the situation before it bubbles up to the point where we don't even know how to turn things around. And it's already like, not that things are too late, but it climaxed to the very, very peak. What do you think, Avi?
I think this actually takes us to the next segment,
Does
which
it?
is
Okay.
feeling lonely in a relationship.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
How did that topic come up from this? I'm curious.
Because when a man or a woman, either or, has so much that came up that they didn't express, and after just being shut down, feeling like I can't talk to my partner because when I do, she doesn't understand. So what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, one of the spouses feel lonely in that relationship. Yeah, the relationship continues, it goes on, you make appearances. Sure, people don't really know, but in that relationship, these people feel alone. They feel like they're not in a partnership. And let's talk about that for a second, because many people feel, even though they are married, they feel alone in their relationship, and that's painful. I want to
And you know what else
hear what you have.
I agree with you 1,000%, because I've also realized, like I've spoken even recently to a guy I was talking to, and from just the conversation I had with him, what really like made me, like your comment right now, it's almost like sometimes we cannot change what we don't acknowledge. And sometimes our spouse is talking to us loud and clear, telling us there is a problem. You need to go get help. You need to, there's something wrong with you. Maybe there's some deep unresolved wounds from your childhood or your upbringing or your thinking. Go see a therapist. Go to a psychiatrist. Go to a rebbitzin. Go to a rabbi. Your spouse is telling you, go get help. I see there's something like it's affecting not only you, it's affecting all of us. You need to take care of it. But the spouse denies it. She or he sees nothing wrong with them. And you know what happens? Because they're denying that there's really a problem with their behavior and it's affecting the whole family, the kids, the husband, everybody around them is feeling like it's just, they can't handle this anymore because they're not acknowledging the problem. Like you said, there's a lot of loneliness because now the spouse has to go through this all by himself or all by herself. And that, I don't know, I don't even know what's worse at this point. The spouse that has to go through all this by himself or herself, or the one that doesn't want to acknowledge that there is a problem. We look at mental health as if it's some sort of a disease. We look at it like maybe something is wrong with you. Why do I have to see a specialist? You go see a specialist. And that's like such a bad stigma. Like we almost make it look like everything is fine. Nothing's wrong with me. Something's wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you if you have to go and seek professionals for help. It's almost like if you have to treat your blood pressure. You wouldn't say, why do I have to take a blood pressure pill? If you have to treat your cholesterol, you don't say, why do I have to take a cholesterol pill? You go and you seek help. So if your spouse is communicating to you, there is something wrong with the way you're lashing out, with the way you're behaving, with the way everybody, like the way you're treating the kids. Go seek help. See if everything is okay. Maybe think and validate and acknowledge it and say, maybe I do need help. That's my 2 cents on that.
We have some comments coming in. Let's take a look at that for a second. All
Absolutely.
right. Miriam says that's exactly it. Feeling lonely. Not always can you talk about what bothers you. You feel understood. Absolutely. And I think also culturally, depending on where the spouse was raised and how they were raised, sometimes it's also denial because it's coming from a place of fear. What does this mean if my spouse has depression? Does that mean my relationship is over? What does this mean if my spouse has diagnosed anxiety or OCD or something like that? These are scary topics, right? But also when we recognize that this is also manageable, we can manage it, we can control it, right? With the proper guidance, with the proper help, we can control it. Now, I wanted to tell you something. Actually, side piece. I got a message from somebody who says, I was diagnosed with a disorder, with a mental health disorder, and I want to start dating. What am I supposed to do? How do I start dating if I have a diagnosis, right? It's a very valid question. Your life doesn't stop because you have a specific diagnosis, right? It's very important to be able to connect with people that can help you and guide you through it. A lot of what happens is the fear of unknown. We don't know what to expect. We know how we feel because we're going through it on a daily basis. But when we speak to a trained person who can help us, who can guide us, there are answers to our pain. It doesn't have to be this difficult. It doesn't have to, you does not have to feel this scary and this alone, right? When we have someone who we can talk to, who can make sense of all of this, it definitely brings some clarity. And in the end of the day, this goes back to what men really want is validation, is to be seen. I know a lot of people talk about ego and men and ego and ego and ego and ego, but in reality, who doesn't want to be, their ego stroked? Who doesn't want to have a compliment? In all honesty, like, let's be real. Let's be real. How many times does a woman compliment their husband? That is something to talk about. A lot of the times I speak to men, they don't get compliments. Men also want to hear nice words, right? It definitely, the women get the compliments for sure, and it's expected. We want to make them, the respect the woman, make them feel nice, but men want that too. Men want to hear like, hey, I appreciate you doing the homework with our daughter. I appreciate you, going shopping for the family, or whatever it is. And I'm not saying this to negate what women do. Women are amazing and they do incredible work, and we need them, and they're awesome. We're not talking about that. What we're talking about is also acknowledge what men are doing too. Let's see what else it says here.
Right. I agree with you 100%.
What if Marina says, what if the person doesn't want help? I'll be honest, if the person doesn't want help, it is very difficult to be in a situation like that, for sure. I want to just validate it. It is not easy when both of you guys have a different way of raising children, how the family dynamics have to be structured. It's very hard to raise a family that way. I totally recognize that. But even with that there, it's really important to do your part in the family, whatever that means. If the husband is raising the children a certain way and you feel like another way is better, as long as it's not abusive, obviously, right? Um, both can work. Let's make space for both, right? Think about it. A lot. I was talking with a family, and she said, "I want to raise my kids this way." He said, "I want to raise my kids this way." Even though there were very different ways of disciplining, the common denominator was love. And
Mm,
kids need love.
mm.
Kids thrive from love. They develop in a very good way with love, right? They both were showing their discipline differently, their parenting differently. There's no one specific way to parent. Obviously, I'm going to make a disclaimer. I'm not talking about hitting, smacking, standing in the corner. I'm not talking about abuse. I'm just talking about different forms of parenting. Let's make space for that. Let's make space for that conversation. It's not my way or the highway, right?
Right.
Um, uh, uh, Amina says, unfortunately, communication doesn't always work, especially with men who have a certain old school mentality and are very egocentric. You can pour your heart out and tell them how he makes you. Well, hang on a second. Uh, um, you can pour your heart out and tell them how you makes you feel, and it falls on deaf ears. They will just brush it off as you need to complain or the fact that you aren't happy with your life, trying to prove that they are not the issue, but you are. So yes, sadly, communication that is one-sided and is shut down is a form of a toxic relationship. All right,
Yeah,
you got this heated up right now. Let me tell you something. I want to share something. Let's talk about the word toxic relationship.
that is a
I
whole other
hear this
topic.
word all the time. Toxic relationship, right? I'll tell you this. In one way, yeah, you could be right. You can be pouring your heart out. You can be sharing how much you want to make this relationship better and you want to work together to make things right, for sure. And he could be dismissing you and not validating you, right? Number one, I want you to recognize something. And I'm not saying it's okay, but I just want you to show a little bit of empathy. Number one, let's talk about how he was raised. Maybe he never heard "I love you." And I'm not just saying this as a maybe. I'm saying this because I work with men who went through these difficulties. When you actually ask them, when was the last time your parents said "I love you" to you? They looked at me like I have three heads. I love you. My parents never said "I love you," right? That's what they would say. So, and another thing is seeing how the husband saw his parents interact with one another. What do you think he learned in his upbringing? The way he was conditioned was very unhealthy. And of course, he's going to bring that into the relationship unless he works on himself day and night trying to make things better. What do you think generational trauma is? It's what we bring from what we saw into our relationship. Yocheved, you and I both, what are we doing now? Right? We're trying to
Communicate.
break this generational trauma. Why are we constantly talking about this over and over and over again? Because we want to make a stop to it. That's the reason.
So
There's
see,
no other.
even the word toxic relationship, I mean, I'm not here to judge. I don't know this particular story or whatever situation we're talking about, but just the term toxic relationship, right? We phrase it as toxic, but to why, this is my question. How did it come to becoming toxic? It's right. Toxicity is not something that happens overnight. It's something that takes a long time to build up to it. So for anybody that's watching this, that's getting married or newly married, or even those that are married for many years, but specifically those that are just getting married or are dating, think about it. When you see things in your marriages, you see that yellow light flashing. We're not talking about a red light and not a green light, but a yellow light. What does that yellow light indicate? Slow down. You got to slow down. Don't let it come to a point where it becomes toxic. Get yourself help. Communicate. book a vacation out together, go on a dinner night, whatever it may be, before it gets to the point of toxicity. Because toxicity means there were many flashing yellow lights that were missed. And I'll tell you something, one of the greatest advice I can give, if I can give any advice at all, do not, and Avi, I think me and you had this discussion once, you may disagree with this one, never go to sleep on a fight. I know that sometimes you may think like get the person their space, let them cool off. True, maybe not. My point is, if you go to sleep on an argument, you went to sleep on a fight, the next morning, the fight is continuous. Now you go to work without talking to each other. Now the whole day went by, there were no text messages, there was no communication. He comes home, she comes home. It continues that way. And what's happening? You get used to the silence treatment, you get used to this time away from each other. It almost becomes normalized, like, oh, okay, listen, I was fine. My day went perfectly fine. I actually had no headache. Nobody called me all day. We start to get used to this type of lifestyle. But if you tell yourself, I am not going to let him sleep until he wakes up and we resolve this situation. Some people may think it's a mistake. Don't do it. He's heated. She's heated. Don't do it. It's the wrong way to practice your marriage. I'm talking about, again, I don't like to get personal. From personal experience, it never failed me, thank God. If there is a disagreement or fight or an argument, try your hardest. Be the better one. Sometimes I feel like, well, he hurt me. Why do I have to give in? I did nothing wrong. You're not making up with just anybody. We're talking about your partner, your spouse, the one who's going to be with you after your kids are all married off. You're still stuck with each other. So whatever it takes for you to build that relationship, for you to make it up, go for it. You're not belittling yourself. You're just giving yourself that, you're avoiding that toxic relationship, which may come down the road if you don't practice that type of, bonding. That's just my 2 cents. What do you think, Anna?
Yocheved, I'm laughing because I said this before, and I'll say it again. I think you're a wonderful human being. I think you're amazing, and I think your husband is lucky to have you.
What?
With that said, I don't think that's so realistic for everyone. Because I know, because you happens to be you, because I know you're a very forgiving person. Like, that's just you. You go through something, you're able to forgive and move forward. Unfortunately, a lot of people are not so quick to come down, are not so quick to cool off. And sometimes I do 100% agree with you about the silent treatment and the stonewalling. It's not saying, sometimes it's how you say it, right? So if you're not ready to move forward, to say, hey, I need some time to get my thoughts together. I don't want to talk about this tonight. We're going to talk about this another time, or we're going to talk about this tomorrow when I'm feeling less heated. I think that's totally okay too.
And what
Not everything.
let's say, I'm going to stop you right there. We're going to talk about this tomorrow when it's less heated, okay? We're going to have a scenario here. Let's pretend I'm coming to you, we're having a session. This is a situation,
Okay.
all right? Because I see here one of the comments that says, you're right, what if your spouse doesn't want to apologize? There you go. Now, women and men, different thinking patterns. Sometimes the man is very forgiving, sometimes the woman is very forgiving. Sometimes the man likes to hold a grudge. There are many women that want to hold the grudge, okay?
Okay.
Personalities are very, very different. One of the spouse says, I want to talk about this tomorrow. The
Okay.
other spouse says, well, I'm not going to fall asleep. I can't wait until tomorrow. I want to resolve this today because I cannot fall asleep on a fight. So how do you, what's the giving in terms here? So what happens? She may get more pissed off at him because he's not talking to her and she can't fall asleep. He's going to get pissed off at her because she just won't leave him alone. And he just wants to be left alone right now. So put your therapist hat on, Avi. We are going to give you a scenario here. You have a couple like this. This is the situation. So how do you find common grounds? Because the same point, everybody's different. And she wants to be validated and he wants to be validated. So what's the common ground here?
So, number one is respecting each other's space, right? If he doesn't want to do it right now and he's not ready, but she so badly wants it, this is more about her stuff. It's she just wants the validation because very possible, please correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like there's maybe some guilt coming up for her, right? Because if she was the one who's really upset, I don't know if she would be so fired up to resolve the situation, right? It sounds like she wants to resolve the situation because she no longer wants to feel guilty. But in his mind, he's like, hang on a second. I'm not ready yet. I'm still in my feelings. Let me just settle down. If she's so fired up to get it resolved, that's her stuff, where she has to learn to kind of also control her emotions, take a deep breath,
Mm.
think about why you want this so bad. I'm not saying to ignore each other because that's unhealthy, right? We can agree to say, hey, look, I'm not in the right space right now because I'm angry now, right? And it's totally okay. By the way, want to clarify, it is totally okay to be angry. 100%. You can quote me on this. Totally okay to be angry. It's what we do with our anger that is a very big difference. So if we get angry and God forbid, beat the person, no way. If we get angry and psychologically abuse the person, no way, right? But if we are feeling angry, if we're feeling hurt, to say, hey, I need some time right now to get my thoughts together, to allow that person their space. Now, obviously, if you're seeing it's going for 3 days, 4 days, a week, check in with that situation. Be like, hey, what's going on? Clearly, this had such a significant effect on you. It pained you so much that you want so much distance from me. How can we repair this? Where do we move from here? Does that make sense?
Mm. Makes
Going
sense. I mean, a
going
whole
back
week.
going back to what we were talking about before, where the person was talking about a toxic relationship, right? Because it was a two-parter. One of them was where the person doesn't have the ability and the skills to be able to empathize and feel your pain. The other one is where sometimes, and I know this is going to be a little bit painful, but sometimes we get into the relationship with our own baggage, with our own stuff, or I shouldn't say sometimes, all the time. We get into our relationship with our own unresolved baggage. And if that's unresolved, I'll give you an example. If we were raised and developed with very low self-esteem, right? Low self-worth, and we get into a relationship and our spouse shares said something, right? And immediately we think he's putting us down, right? Or immediately he's hurting us or she's hurting us, whatever it is, right? Where's this coming from? It could very much be you're taking your stuff from your childhood that's unresolved and attacking him or attacking her.
So based on
That
what you said now and before, sorry to cut you off, because you're saying the same thing you said before. And I think Marina was the only one who actually got me on this one. That's why I'm laughing as I'm reading this comment, because it just sounds very funny. I can't even move past it. She got me on this one, okay? When you said the reason she wants to make up is because maybe she feels a little guilt. No, I think Marina got me on this one. She said she doesn't want to have the dardisar. That's all it is. It's not about the guilt. Sometimes you just want to avoid the headache. You want to avoid the drama. You want to avoid the unnecessary, like all this extra like garbage, as I just want to call it, right? Like the stuff like he said, she said, he did this, she did this, you came late, you came early, you didn't take the garbage out, you forgot to call me, you forgot to buy the milk. All the garbage that we fight about, we're not talking about serious issues. Obviously, if it's a serious issue, after the heated debate going on, that needs time to cool off. Absolutely. No, like, we're not
okay,
justifying.
okay. So hang on a second. You're backtracking now. Well, I wasn't.
We're talking about
Obviously, you're covered. Hang on.
when people legit will fight over stupidity.
Okay.
And I mean like stupidity. So like, why did you buy me this color? I wanted this color. Why is the shampoo this? Why did you place it here and not here? But why did you not get your socks exactly in the hamper? I told you not to put in this hamper. I wanted it in another hamper. And it becomes this whole big debate. And what happens? They go to sleep on a fight. Now, for some people, it's just like, this is not the fight they want to go to sleep on. They want to just make up, because it's like, oh my God, why did I even make this as an issue? It's not that they feel guilty about it. There is no guilt here. Nobody said that they're guilty. It was like, why did I even bring this up as an issue? It wasn't even worth the fight. So they're like, okay, can we just move on from this? And the other person's like, I'm not moving on right now. Tomorrow, we're going to have another day. No, but what day? This has to
But
be finished. There's no point to fight over this. So some people, they overtake every situation and they magnify it. And it's one day, the next day something else, the next day something else. This affects our mental health as individuals, where eventually we just go crazy from all this nonsense.
usually, I've been doing this for quite some time. Usually, it's not just that one thing.
Okay.
Usually, it's the straw that broke the camel's back, and enough is enough. And either he or she is just so fed up, and they're like, "I'm done. I don't even want to have this conversation. How many times can I repeat myself?" Obviously, Yocheved, if we're talking about small little issues like you forgot the milk or you forgot the socks, we're not talking about that. And I agree with you. You should do everything in your power to make up before bed, because you know what, tomorrow is not promised, and we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, obviously, in the bigger picture, it would be wonderful if everyone would be like Yocheved and make up that night. But
Perfect. This is a concept that I really feel like when they say toxic relationships, every relationship it's ups and downs. There is no perfect relationships, right? There's up there. You feel like, oh my God, I'm gonna quit. But at the end of the day, I just feel like if we have the mentality, and nobody's perfect, to just not hold that grudge, not feel like every conversation is a waste of time, every complaint is always, oh, you're always complaining, you're always doing this, you're always doing that, and truly look at each other the same exact moment you looked at each other under the chuppah. Like, I could just go back to that moment of time where you looked at each other and life was like this beautiful, blissful situation where you're like, like, oh my God, it's just the two of us. We love each other and nobody else matters. Like, remember that time. Remember that time under the chuppah, how much in love you were. What happened to all that? It's almost like, one of the biggest problems of our generation, we're living in such a fast-paced world. Everything is right now, right now, right now, this second, this second, this second, such instant gratification. And if we don't get that instant gratification right now, what happens? In our own mental psyche, we start to convince ourselves, he doesn't love me anymore. She doesn't love me anymore. She's doing things behind my back. She's doing things behind my back. His mother said something about me. His father said something about me. And all this negativity, which I was saying before, is building up in our minds, causing us to start to feel a certain way. We bring this out to our spouse, and men in particular, because this is a men's mental health topic, cannot handle all this pressure. They are not built for that. Women are a little bit stronger in holding a lot of this negativity. I'm not saying it's okay. It's not okay. But we are built. Maybe God gives us that extra, I don't know, energy or healing or whatever. We can hold on a lot more pressure than men can. Men fall faster, even though they appear to be tougher physically, emotionally, mentally, they carry themselves that way. But a man actually cannot handle stress. Women can handle more stress than men. Therefore, we need to be mindful that our men, as tough as they appear, are very mushy and they are very, very delicate. That's why we need to consider that. Simply saying this because, again, we are talking on men's behalf today, to men's mental awareness. Women too need love. Women also need all the attention. Women also need to be respected. She cannot handle unlimited amount of stress. I'm not saying it that way, but just keep it in mind. What do you think, Ad?
but how do you feel now as a man? How do you feel that makes a man feel where men can handle stress, men can handle hardships? And I know you're coming from a loving place. I know that. But do you feel like sometimes women make it sound like men are just not capable of doing things?
No, not in that way. Physically, they are capable of a lot more. Physically, men can physically go to work and hustle and bustle and that all that stuff physically. Mentally, again, this is just my opinion. This is not proven by any science, okay? I'm just talking from my own thought process. Men are very, very delicate as far as stress, worry, anxiety. Like, when we have, for example, financial stresses, or the children are having something, a woman, believe it or not, can withstand a lot more. I think maybe, and again, maybe women just have a different connection with the way they pray. That can possibly be one of the things. Like, when a woman prays, she releases a lot of her energy and emotion during prayer. Watch a woman pray and watch a man pray. It's a little bit different. Again, I don't go to the men's side. I'm not there, so I can't really fully speak. But when I do women's events and I host them and we have all these, where we actually pray, there are many women that will literally start crying from like nothing happened, but they're crying. They're not crying because, oh my God, ooh, it's depressing. They're crying because their way of prayer and their faith and the way they handle, challenges are different. They really, truly, they feel like, God, you got this. I'm not alone. Their connection and their belief sometimes takes them up another level. A man too is faithful and believes, but I don't know if his connection and the way he talks and communicates with God is on the same level. That may be also what allows a woman to withstand so much more pressure. That could be a reason. I don't know.
No, it sounds like you're touching on some like religious or spiritual concepts, which I hear. I've heard that before from a religious standpoint. With that said, can I give you an opportunity to also talk about the strength that a man brings to the table?
Absolutely. I think I got very offended when I said men have, all these.
Well, not that offended. I didn't get offended, but as a man coming on this platform and talking about a men's mental health, subject, we also want to be able to hear that men are needed, they're loved,
Absolutely.
they have the
Absolutely.
support, they're validated, like all those concepts we know deep down. I mean, come on, we know the whole world is standing on women. Like we know that, we get it. You guys run the show. You say jump, we say how high. Like we get it, right? But also at the same time, it's very, very important, just as it's important for women to hear nice words, it's very important for women to say that about men as well.
So
To
strength of a
and
man.
if you look at it from a scientific standpoint, right?
Mhm.
You want your husband to do something good for the family. Pay him a compliment. Notice the good things that he does. I guarantee you, he will do it again. That's just how it works. When you notice something, when you reward it, what's a reward? You stroke the ego, you reward it, it happens again. And I'm not saying that men are like dogs who are getting treats with ego stroking. And that's not what I'm talking about. But what I'm saying is just recognize and validate it. And it's not about how much work the woman does and how much the man needs to see it, but it's also to be able to kind of be there in that space with them, which
Can
actually
I
takes us
answer
to,
that question that you
sure.
posed earlier? The
Yeah.
strength that a man brings. I think men have a tremendous role. Men are they're like the heroes of the families. They're the ones that a woman can rely on to be like that protector. They have a role of a protector. A man has a lot of wisdom, even though they teach us that women are wise. Men are very, very wise too. If you can sit down at a table and have a conversation with a man over something women are discussing and just look at a man's perspective, his way of thinking is so much wiser because he doesn't do things from an emotional perspective. He does things from wisdom. Like, where is this going to get you? So I think, like many times, we kind of negate the man's role in the upbringing of our children. But if we pay attention with how a man spends time with his children, how much love and how much affection men give to their children during playtime, I personally find you can't even compare it. Motherly love is different, but fatherly love is a totally different level. So to your answer, Avi, what do I think men bring? I think men are very, very powerful, dominant creatures. They're the ones that do have, to your question before, do you feel like men have a lot of pressure? Yes, they actually do have a lot of pressure. Society puts a lot of pressure, unfortunately, on men. Men are expected to be tough. Men are expected to be the ones to provide. Men are expected to withstand much more than a woman is expected. And sometimes it's very, very unfair because they too have times when things are not successful for them. If a woman is unsuccessful and a man is unsuccessful, sometimes I feel like maybe a man may be, viewed as a little bit more harsher because he's expected to have things more perfect than a woman does. That's my opinion.
Regarding finances, let's talk about that a little bit, because I understand that in many circles, especially in our culture, there's a lot of financial responsibility that falls on a man. And also sometimes let's recognize that sometimes in certain cases the woman makes more money than the man.
Right.
So talking from both perspectives, where you were saying the man is the protector of the home and it's important for him to make the family feel safe, right? Again, going back to some religious and spiritual teachings, this is something that I've heard, right? And this is not coming from a scientific standpoint, which is making the man feel like a man. What does that mean to you?
Respect. Consulting with him.
Yeah.
Asking him for his opinion.
Even though you already know what you want to do, but just saying, hey, I want to hear what your thoughts are. Just create a space for it. Bringing the man into the conversation, making them feel like their words have some value. There are some women who are pretty headstrong and really don't need a man in their life. They got it all together, right? But when you bring the man into the circle and be like, hey, I want to hear your thoughts, that can absolutely raise the value in that relationship. That can absolutely bring a closer connection. Talking about feeling alone in relationships, a lot of the time we feel alone in relationships is because we stopped having those conversations.
Criticism.
We stopped dating. And again, I know life is busy, life hits, but that spark that we used to have one day, it starts to dwindle down. So it's just recognizing that, and it's recognizing our needs. Yes, we have this expectation for the guy to have it all together, but in reality, also recognizing at the end of the day, they're human, and at the end of the day, they have ups and downs, and also the social pressure of being enough, being an amazing husband, being an amazing father, being a successful businessman, having money, being able to buy a house and have a nice car and be fit and dressed well and have it all together. It's a challenge. So whenever we recognize that, and when men can talk about this and normalize it and say like, hey, look, we're here, we're just trying to figure it out, we don't have all the answers, one step at a time, I'm going to be kinder to myself, because a lot of the times men compare themselves with other men. What does that mean? Let's say I graduated this and this time with my friends. Where are my friends? Where am I? Am I better than them? Am I lower than them? Am I on the same level to them, right? A lot of times there's an unspoken comparison. And it's coming from a place of fear. The fear is, am I enough? I just want to be enough. So whenever we have the people who are supportive in our circles, who can make us feel like, hey, and it's not only about them, but also it's not only about the people who are around them. Also, for a guy who's watching this and listening to this, being able to work on that voice that you have in your own head, being able to sometimes lower the volume on that bully that's making you feel that you're not good enough, that you don't have it all together. There's so many men who you would never think struggle with low self-esteem, low self-worth, feeling like the other guys are, there's certain guys that are like the life of the party, right? The loud one. And sometimes not all guys are like that. There's more on the sidelines. And it can be painful. It can feel like, oh, you're not living up to something. But you know what? No, you are enough. And use your strengths that you have in life to be able to get you to the place where you want to be.
So well said, Avi. That was so beautiful. You're absolutely right. Absolutely. 100%. Very, very important topic. Very important point. And we're going to end off because it is getting very late. But I think it's important to also add to this whole topic about mental health. We spoke about communication, challenges, a lot of different topics. But I think Also, one of the most very important points is not to criticize, overly criticize. It can be, of course, not to criticize the woman, but definitely, since this is mental health for men, criticism, very, very destructive, can definitely create a lot of negative mental health emotions there. So try to avoid excessive criticism unless it's for constructive purposes only. And again, when something is constructive, the way it's being spoken and the way you're saying it and the tone of voice you're saying it is different than when something is just there to criticize. Because the more you criticize, and we spoke about what is the role of a man and how should a man be, believe it or not, when we criticize, that manly role goes down the drain, and all of a sudden his expectation and his role, he's no longer going to even feel like a man, to act like a man. And then we start to say, well, what's going on with you? You know, you're not like so-and-so, or you don't do this and you don't do that. Because after a while, all that criticism sinks in and really diminishes their self-worth and how they feel about themselves.
A perfect example would be if, let's say, a woman cleans the kitchen or washes the dishes a specific way and puts them away a specific way. And one night she asks him to help out, and he does help out, and he does it, right? Then she comes into the kitchen and says, how did you do it? This is not how you do it. I always have to do it this way. How you didn't do a good enough job, right? And how does he feel? He feels like garbage, you know? He tried to do something for the family. He doesn't typically do it, let's just say. And here she goes, bringing him down and berating him. So it's like, I agree with you, Yochai, but it's like, if you can, stay away from that criticism. You know, there's certain things that we can just bypass and go to sleep without a fight.
Thank you. There you go. You see the lesson of the day. Without a fight. If everybody watching is in a disagreement, make up, talk it out, you know, go to sleep without a fight.
Or if you just need some time to just take a deep breath and gather your thoughts, that is valid as well.
There you go. All
All
right,
right, guys.
as always, this was a very, very fun, excellent live. I think very, very informative, educational.
Definitely.
Thank you very much for being a part of this segment tonight.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in and looking forward to connecting. This is a great segment. If anybody has different topics that you feel like you want us to share and talk about, let us know in the comments. You can also private message us. If you don't want to share it on the chat here, private message us, and we're definitely going to make sure to respond and to address it. Yochai, this was a pleasure. Take care. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.